let's talk about concision. So you're really good at creating concise, targeted messages. We've seen that in your personal brand and certainly in your work with clients. So were you always good at creating those concise, impactful messages, or if not, then how did you develop that skill?
Well, thank you for the kind words to begin with. I appreciate that. And no, I have not always been concise. I love to talk and I love to write. And so it was kind of, uh, it was difficult at first, to kind of wrap my head around this concept, but I have to look at it as someone who, I'm not the reader in this, I'm the writer in this purpose, right, that we're talking about. And I have to think about the consumer. And we all know people don't like to read for the most part, unless it's something they're really, really interested in or really need a lot of information. And people don't like to read or listen or whatever. So you want to get your message across in as little as words as possible. So, think about a website. Do you want to read a website that's got, 50 different pages to it? Probably not. If it's got 5 pages, great. That's awesome. And how do you build upon that? How do you write to that? There are definitely different tricks you can use, whether you're putting this in writing or even for your presentations. Maybe it's your keynote slide deck, where you can break things up into subheads. You can use bullet points. But keep things really short and concise. And, going back to it from a presentation aspect, anytime you can inject that personality or that personal story in there to break things up, I think really, really is helpful. But yeah, just pare things down with the shortest amount of words as much as possible without losing sight of the vision or any other critical elements that need to be in there.
Was there any, as you were developing that skill, were there any techniques or strategies that worked really well for you or that helped you to really improve your skills?
It's a matter of editing. When you write it out the first time around, you're like, oh yeah, it's perfect, but it's not. You've got to go back and edit and edit and edit some more, and personally what I like to do is I like to read things out loud. So I can make sure that it comes across as conversational as possible. I write like I talk. So you mentioned, hey, you put things in writing. I've seen on your website, things are in very short, concise word. Yeah, they are. That's how I talk. That's how most people talk. We don't necessarily talk in run-on sentences, right? So you want to write the same way.
Okay, that's interesting. So you teach students on entrepreneurship. And what I'm interested in how they pitch themselves, right? As a freelancer, as a business person or new entrepreneur, you have to pitch yourself, introduce yourself to people. You have to sell yourself, your business. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the mistakes that you've seen them make in that specific skill set of pitching themselves?
Sure. Well, there's a few that come to mind. I would say number one would be a lack of clear structure. Quite honestly, there's no organization, there's no rhyme or reason. They just kind of put things kind of willy-nilly in their presentation. A lot of people will put too much information in there, and I don't think that's what a pitch is for. I think a pitch is more to just get the attention, get some interest level peaked, get some interest peaked. You don't have to, give them everything. You don't want to bore the audience either. So you have to be very, very concise with that. But also, I would say there are people who don't get to the point quickly enough. Think about when you go and listen in on a presentation. Now, I'm not talking the TED Talks or these awesome people that we find on YouTube, but if you go to a conference or whatever, more often than not, you're going to find presenters who get up there and they start their presentation with an introduction of themselves. Hi, I'm Julie Cortes. I'm a freelance writer, yada, 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 right? That's great. Thank you for the intro, but you've lost me already. Right? So I would say start the presentation instead with some attention grabbing hook, something that's going to pull at their heartstrings, something that's going to hit their emotional hotspot. Get to the point really quick. Illustrate that in this attention getting hook at the beginning, illustrate it. And then once you've got their attention, then go and introduce yourself. I think that would be better off, starting with the topic at hand and then kind of getting to your introduction after that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a challenge that I've seen. Too much prefacing and too much context or ramping up to the bottom line. It's like, people are waiting to know what exactly is it that you're trying to tell me. So to your point, like get to the point quickly. Also in the military, they have an acronym BLUF, BLUF, which
Mhm.
stands for bottom line up front,
Yeah.
which is a email technique that they use where they basically put the bottom line up front at the top of the email. What is the key decision that needs to be made? Or what's the key message that you need to understand? And then they go into more details and evidence to support that specific thing. But like if somebody is really rushing and they don't have time to go into the background and the details, they can see the bottom line really quick right away. And in the business world, it's the same thing.
Mhm.
You got to give them the key message. What is the key thing that they need to make a decision on, or the key information that's going to move the needle for them right away? And people don't necessarily need all of the information and the background and the context that you want to provide them. But we have an urge and a desire to provide extra context and background.
Yeah, totally. You got to keep it brief. What's that old adage that you mentioned, from the military, but I'm even thinking from grade school. Was it KISS, keep it simple, stupid? You know, but yeah, it's really that easy. It's really that simple. Just, yeah, get to the bottom line, and then go ahead and flesh everything out throughout the rest of your presentation.
And I want to go back to your point earlier. You talked about editing.
Mhm.
How much editing, when you were improving your concision skills and being able to design a great message that gets to the point, like before you got to that level, how much editing would you do? And then what's the extra amount of editing? Because I think a lot of people have a hard time quantifying, like how much time should I spend on editing or refining my message or my text in my speech, let's say, or even if I'm just giving like a pitch to somebody in a semi-formal context. So how much editing, did you find that it was a lot more editing than you originally thought that was necessary to create a really great message? Like how do we quantify that?
Sure. Well, I think most people, when they think editing or proofreading, that it's just you write the paper or whatever it is that you're working on, your presentation, and then you do a once over on it, making simple edits. I would say double that at least, go through it like 3 or 4 times, because you're going to find something each and every time that you're going to want to tweak. And also remember to say everything out loud, even if you're composing a written, paragraph or document, go through that 3 or 4 times, and verbalize it the whole time, talk it out loud, because you'll find something, maybe it's even something that you want to add emphasis to, like you would do that in speech, but how do you convey that in writing? Do you put something in bold? Do you do it in italics, underline it, whatever. But yeah, I would go over at least 4 different times, quite honestly.